Dear students, today I am going to explain one important question from the plus one commerce textbook, last chapter, taxation. What is the meaning of direct tax? What is the meaning of indirect tax? My aim is to explain what are the differences between direct taxes and indirect taxes. I am going to explain what are the differences between direct taxes and indirect taxes. So, when we know the differences, before studying the differences, we must know what is the meaning of tax. We must know what is the meaning of direct tax. What is the meaning of indirect tax. If you are study these three terms, tax, direct tax, indirect tax, then we study the differences between direct taxes and indirect taxes. Okay, first I am going to explain about what is the meaning of tax. Tax is the compulsory contribution to the state. It is the main revenue to the government. That government means state. The tax levied on income or profit of individual and institution. Tax revenue is utilized for the expenses like administrative expenses, internal and external security, and the construction of building and the building infrastructure facilities. The tax income, the tax revenue is utilized by the state. So, first we study about what is net tax. Tax is the compulsory contribution. It is a compulsory contribution to the state. Tax is a compulsory contribution to the state. The general public or all the citizens are contributing contributing tax to the state, to the government. State means government. The tax is a compulsory contribution collected from the citizen by the state. So, tax is a compulsory contribution. It is the main revenue to the government. Tax is a compulsory contribution to the state. It is collected from the public. It is collected from the citizens of India. Then, it is the main income to the state. Tax is the main revenue to the state. This revenue is utilized for the administrative expenses. Administrative expenses are utilized from this revenue. Then internal and external security, this tax revenue is utilized. Then also for building infrastructure facilities, construction of road, construction of dam or construction of railways, for building, these are the infrastructure facilities provided by the state. For building infrastructure facilities, this tax revenue is utilized. This is a brief explanation about tax. Tax is the compulsory contribution collected from the public by the state. It is a main revenue. It is calculated out of profit. It is calculated out of profit or out of income. Out of profit or out of income. This tax is collected from the public. It is a compulsory contribution by the public to the state. This tax is collected from profit or income. It is the main revenue to the state. The tax revenue is utilized for administrative expenses, internal and external security, and building infrastructure facilities. This tax revenue is utilized by the state. Then we study about two types of taxes collected by the state. The state means government. The government of India collected two types of taxes. Number one is direct tax. Number two, indirect tax. If the tax is directly paid by an individual, it is called as a direct tax. If the tax is collected by the state indirectly, it is called as an indirect tax. The heading itself explains the meaning of direct tax. If the tax is paid by an individual directly to the government, it is called as a direct tax. If the individual pay the amount through other persons, it is called as indirect tax. That is a simple meaning of direct tax and indirect tax. Direct tax means if tax is levied on the income, if any tax is levied on the income or wealth earned by an individual, is direct tax means if a tax is levied from income or wealth of a person, which is directly paid, to the government. It is called as a direct tax. Once again I explain. If tax is levied from income of any person or from the wealth of that person, which is directly paid by that person, it is called as the direct tax. Direct tax is the tax levied by the government from the income or wealth of a person, which is collected directly by the person who are earned wealth or earned income, is called as a direct tax. Indirect example, income tax, then wealth tax, capital gain tax, security transaction tax, are the examples of the direct tax. Then indirect tax. If tax is levied on the goods and services, goods or services of a person, which is collected from buyer, and paid by the seller, to the government, it is called as an indirect tax. If tax is levied from goods or services of a person collected from buyer and paid by the seller to the government, it is called as an indirect tax. Here, the person who earned income or wealth can directly pay the amount to the government. But here, the goods and services are utilized by the buyer. But the buyer is not directly pay the tax. Through seller, this tax is given to the government. It is called as an indirect tax. Example, GST. GST is the example of the indirect tax. Goods and service tax is an example of the indirect tax. Once again, I want to explain what I told. Tax is the main revenue to the government. This tax is a compulsory contribution of an individual or corporation or companies. It is compulsory contribution. It is collected by the government. The amount collected by the government is the main revenue for the state. The state utilizes this amount for the security, for the internal and external security, for the administrative purpose, and constructing building, government building, constructing dam, constructing bridges. So totally we can tell, for building infrastructure facilities, this tax amount is utilized by the state. The tax are two types of tax. Number one, direct tax. Number two, indirect tax. Direct tax means if a tax is levied from the income or wealth and the income or wealth earned by the person who is directly paid to the state. It is called as a direct tax. Example, income tax is the best example of the direct tax. Indirect tax, if tax is levied on the goods or services of a person, collected from buyer and paid by the seller to the government, is called as an indirect tax. In our book, in our textbook, 6 points are given. What are the differences between direct tax and indirect tax? 6 points are given. I want to explain these 6 points one by one. What is the meaning of direct tax? What is the meaning of direct tax? What is the meaning of indirect tax? Direct tax and indirect tax. Then, point number 1. Example. First point is the last point given in the textbook. So, it is very simple point. So, first we study the example of the direct tax. Already I explained the example of the direct taxes are: number 1, income tax. In direct tax, income tax is an example of the direct tax. Or wealth tax is an example of the direct tax. The example of the indirect taxes are GST, goods and service tax, and excise duty. This is the example of the direct tax and indirect tax. One of the differences between direct tax and indirect taxes are: number 1, example. On the basis, on this basis, this class will into examples. Example of the direct tax is income tax and wealth tax. The example of the indirect taxes are GST and excise duty. Already we studied, I explained this point, so 1 point is coming. Remaining 5 points we will study one by one. Then point number 2, meaning. What is the meaning of direct tax? Already I explained, if the tax is levied, if tax is levied from income or wealth of a person who is directly paid the amount to the state, it is called as a direct tax. Already I explained these points. Once again I explain. Direct tax is a tax levied by the government from the person who is earning income or wealth. The earned person directly pay the amount to the government. It is called as a direct tax. Indirect tax means if tax is levied for the goods or services, for the goods or services of a person collected from buyer, and paid by the seller, to the state. It is called as an indirect tax. It is levied. Direct tax means the tax levied from the income or wealth earned by the person. The earned person directly pay the amount to the state. It is called as a direct tax. Indirect tax means if a tax is levied from goods or services collected from buyer and paid by the seller to the government, it is called as a indirect tax. Point number 3. Then incidence and impact. Incidence and impact. It falls, the direct tax falls on the same person. The same person is paid the tax by the same person. The wealth is earned by the same person. The income is earned by the same person. The direct tax falls on the same person. That same person directly pay the amount to the government. Directly pay the amount to the state. Incident and impact. The direct tax falls on the same person. The same person directly pay the tax to the state. But here, the indirect tax falls on different person. Different persons, but collected from the consumer. It falls on different person, but collected from customers, paid by the seller, paid by the seller to the state. Once again I explain. Incident and impact. Direct taxes falls on the same person. The same person, the person who earned income, directly pay the amount to the state. But in the case of indirect tax, it falls on different person, but it is collected from the customer. The amount is collected from the customer by the seller, but the same amount is paid to the state by the seller. Through seller only this tax is paid. Falls on different person, but collected from customer, paid by the seller to the state. Then 3 points are completed. Then point number 4. Tax evasion. Point number 4, evasion. Tax evasion is possible. Tax evasion is possible in the direct tax. Tax evasion is more difficult. It is possible, but it is more. Tax evasion is more difficult, but it is possible, more difficult. Now, point number 4, tax evasion. Tax evasion is possible in the direct tax. Tax evasion is more difficult in the case of indirect tax. Then, inflation. What is the meaning of inflation? Inflation means the value of money is decreasing. In economics, in economics chapters, we are studying. Inflation means the value of money is decreasing. So the cost of the prices is increased. That is called as inflation. Direct tax helps in reducing the inflation. Reducing the inflation. But indirect taxes, it contributes. Indirect tax contributes in inflation. Then point number 6, shiftable. Shiftable cannot be shifted. Cannot be shifted to others. Can be shifted to others. These are all the 6 points relating to direct tax and indirect tax. Once again I explain. First I explain about what is the examples of the direct tax and indirect tax. Income tax and wealth tax are the examples of the direct tax. GST and the customs duty are the examples of the indirect tax. Excise duty, customs duty are the example of the indirect tax. Income tax and wealth tax is an example of the direct tax. Then what is the meaning of direct tax? Direct tax means income. Tax is levied. If tax is levied on the income or wealth of a person, which is paid by the person directly to the state, is called as direct tax. If the tax is levied in the goods and services which is collected from buyer and paid by the seller to the state, is called as an indirect tax. Incident and impact. The direct tax falls on the same person, imposed on the income of the person and paid by the same person, but falls on different person, imposed on the seller but collected from the customer and paid to the seller. Tax evasion is possible in the case, is not is possible in the direct tax. Tax evasion, not paying the amount, tax evasion is possible in the case of direct tax, but the tax evasion is more difficult in the case of indirect tax. Inflation, direct tax reducing inflation, indirect tax contribute inflation. Shiftable, the direct tax cannot be shifted from one person to another person, but indirect tax is shifted, can be shifted to others. Okay, dear students, only one question, one 5-mark question I explained. Try to study this question today itself. God bless you.